Hi everyone, it's Steve from Smart PE. Thanks for joining me today on this video tutorial, which is going to be looking at levers within GCSE PE. And you might just be looking at this video tutorial and making a few notes as I'm talking, or you might be using this within a lesson, or you might want to actually use some of the slides as actual physical resources. So if you want to access the resources and slides, there's a link in the description that can take you to the slides / resources, and you can print them out to use as you see fit. Just a couple of things. It is quite a technical and difficult topic, is levers, because there's quite a lot of information. So at times I'm going to ask you to pause the video to do certain tasks. Or alternatively, you might want to pause the video and obviously scroll back just to make sure you've fully understood any information that we've gone over. So hopefully by the end of this tutorial you'll have listened to and hopefully understood as much as the following objectives. You're going to be able to hopefully identify the shapes and understand the definitions when drawing out a diagram for levers. You're then going to hopefully be able to identify the class of lever system for particular sporting examples, and then you're also going to hopefully be able to know the mechanical advantage and disadvantage of the different classes of levers. So by the end of this lesson, hopefully the slide that you can see in front of you now, you're going to have completed this and filled it out to make sure you've understood the information on levers. Hopefully in order to do that, you may have already filled out this, and this is the basic information that you need to know for the diagram shapes for levers. So if you haven't done that already, I'd really recommend copying these down using this slide here. And in order to progress and make sure you can identify the class of lever from sporting examples, you must know this information. So within my lesson that my GCSE PE group are using right now, they've already copied this information within their books. Hopefully they've fully understood it. If you need to copy this down, just pause the video right now. And then after that, they've then took this little test, and we've called this a mastery lesson. Now, in order for them to move on to the next slide, I've said that they need to get at least 10 out of 12 answers correct out of these 12 questions in order to fully understand it, to be able to have a chance of understanding the next bit of information. I've also set a challenge of some students trying to achieve grandmaster status, which is where they get 100% or 12 out of 12 in this one. So if you haven't done this test but you'd like to complete it, feel free to download the slide and print it out, or just complete it looking at that and making a few notes. So pause this video now before I reveal the answers. Okay, these are the answers. Again, pause these videos. I'm going to move on straight on to the next slide. Okay, if you're up to this slide now, hopefully you've achieved our first objective of being able to identify the different diagram shapes for levers. And again, it's really important. I can't stress enough that if you don't understand that, you need to go back a little bit on this video to make sure you've understood that. So the first thing that I'd like you to do now is this is going to be helping us to identify the class of lever from different sporting examples. So what I'd like you to do first of all now is, if we look at the picture in the top left hand corner of the rower, I'd like you to try and complete this table for the rower, and then I'd like you to do the same for the person kicking a rugby ball, the girl doing a bicep curl, and a basketball player taking a shot. Now what I'd like you to do, and I'll go through this one just briefly, is that this particular sheet has got a little bit of a clue. There is a square that's filled out. Okay, so I know that that classes as the load. So this one, I can just fill that out there and write in load. Okay, your job now is to work out whether the biceps is at the fulcrum or is it the effort, and is the oarlock the fulcrum or the effort, and then to fill in the correct or relevant shape associated with the biceps and the fulcrum or the effort. You're then going to repeat that for the table for the rugby kicker, the picture of the girl doing the bicep curls, and the basketball player taking a set shot. Okay, pause your video and do that now, please. When you've finished, just press play. Okay, so these are the answers that you should have got there. Now what I'd like you to do is just go through each table and double check that you have then got the correct answer. Okay, so if you've got effort written incorrectly, give it a tick next to biceps. If you've got the arrow, give it a tick. Obviously if you've got any wrong, I'd just like you to cross them out and put in the correct answer, please. Okay, so pause your video and just tick or cross and make any corrections to your tables, please. Okay. We're now going to go on to examples of first, second or third class lever systems, okay? And it's your job within the exam, or it could be for a particular question. You might get a particular sporting example and you have then got a class whether it is a first, second or third class lever system. And this is really, really important to do because you might get a simple question that asks you to just class the lever system. But then it might ask you to talk about a mechanical advantage or disadvantage based on the class of lever system. And to have any chance of doing that, you have to be able to say what class of lever system a particular sporting example is. Okay, so like I said, each lever system can be classed as a first, a second or a third class lever. Okay, so within sport, if you're doing a particular skill or action, all right, the movement will be moved by a lever, of the movement of the body, or rowing oar, for example, will be moved, and that is the actual lever system. So it's important to know what class of lever system it is. The main thing that I can suggest to remember this is the following: FLE 1, 2, 3. All right, and that's really, really simple. It basically means that if you were drawing the diagram and the fulcrum was in the middle, all right, the fulcrum was in the middle of the three different shapes that you drew on your lever arm, okay, the fulcrum in the middle would mean it would be a first class lever system. If the load was in the middle, it would be a second class lever system, and if the effort was in the middle, it would be a third class lever system. So my top tip in an exam is if you get a question on levers or classes of levers, I would write that box FLE 1, 2, 3 somewhere on your exam paper, just to make sure you don't make any mistakes with that, because I've taught this for a few years now. I studied at university and I still have to take my time when I'm doing this because it's very, very easy to make mistakes. So I'll just repeat, whatever's in the middle, that dictates what class of lever system it is. So for example, this lever arm which has been drawn up there, all right, we can see that in the middle is the arrow, okay, and I know that the arrow is the effort. So straight away, I know that that is a third class lever system. This next one, I can see that the square is in the shape, which means that's the load. So I know that that is a second class lever system. This particular one, the triangle or the fulcrum is in the middle. So that is a first class lever system. Okay, and again, I can't stress enough, you must know your diagram shapes for lever systems to have any chance of being able to class the lever systems. But once you know those shapes and you remember FLE 1, 2, 3, I think that's pretty straightforward. Okay, so just remember FLE 1, 2, 3. I cannot stress that enough. So first class lever system. I've got a picture of a rower here to tell you that that is the first class lever system. I'm just going to talk about this a little bit first of all. So you might get a question in an exam where there's just a picture and it asks you to analyse it or decide what class of lever system it is. Now what I would do first of all is I try and just draw a bit of a diagram or a few shapes over top of that. So first of all, the load that is going to be being moved, right, or the resistance, is going to be in the water. Okay, that's what's heavy. The water is being pushed and move along. So I know that that's going to be the square shape. If I go up the lever arm on the diagram, which is the oar itself, all right, I will then get to something called an oarlock, and that is where the oar itself pivots and moves around. So I know that that's my pivot point. That's going to be a triangle, and the hands that are connected to the oar are sort of connected to the muscles in the arm and the bicep and the shoulder. All right, so I know that that is going to be my effort, and that is going to be an arrow. All right, so straight away going on to that, I know that then if I were to draw a neat and tidy class of lever system, that my load would go on one side, fulcrum in the middle, and effort. So as the fulcrum's in the middle, nice and easy, that is a first class lever system. The examples that you need to know for your GCSE PE exam would be possibly rowing a boat, like we just talked through, tilting your head back to look up into the sky, okay, or a triceps extension. The second class lever system, we've now got standing on your tiptoes. So for this one, the fulcrum or the pivot point is going to be the ball of the toes, and that's where you are obviously pivoting up and down on the ball of the foot or the toes. Okay. The next thing is then going to be the load, all right, and that's going to be the weight of the person that's travelling all the way down. Imagine if you were on a weighing scale, that is the part of the foot that takes the kind of the measurement really of how much you weigh, and that then is my load. The next one is the effort, and that particular arrow is drawn right on the Achilles heel. Okay, right on the Achilles heel. It's not drawn on the muscle, okay, even though that's the one that contracts and gets shorter, but it's where the Achilles attaches, and that's really important to know about the effort. It's where the Achilles, where the tendon, and in this particular example, the Achilles attaches. Okay, so again, I know that if I was to draw that out, my diagram would look like this. The load is in the middle, so that is a second class lever system. And the only example you need to know for this is standing on your tiptoes. A third class lever system, we've got a biceps curl. Okay, again, we've got the weight, all right, the dumbbell, which is the load at the end. Okay, as you go along then, the next thing you get to is the effort, followed by the pivot point, the fulcrum. Okay, now this can be a little bit of a tricky one, the third class lever system for a biceps curl, because if you were to try and break this down anatomically, you'd need to know your stuff to do this. So for example, just put an image of like the bones and the muscles over the top of that. I know for sure if I start at the load, just draw a square shape in there, and if I was to draw a line across there now, the next thing that I would get to would either be the effort or the fulcrum. So if I draw this red line and keep on continuing, do I get to the effort, which is the tendon, don't forget, or do I get to the pivot point? Boom, right there, that is the effort. Okay, I then continue and I then get to my triangle shape, my fulcrum. So I know that if I was to draw this out now, it'd be the load, the dumbbell weight at the end. I'd then get to the effort next, and I'd then get to the pivot point, the fulcrum. All right, which then means that that is a third class lever system, and you have to know how the bones are structured, and that's why this is sometimes quite a difficult topic in itself. Again, if that doesn't make sense, pause your video, ask your GCSE PE teacher, or go over what I've just said again, and hopefully that will make sense. One more thing about third class lever systems as well is that the examples you need to know is bicep curls and kicking a ball, but also it is the most common class of lever in the human body. And I know this probably sounds a little bit unambitious, but if you get a question asking to classify a lever system and you cannot remember, you're not 100% sure, my recommendation would be just guess third class lever system because it's the most common one, so it's most likely to be questioned. Okay, so why is a bicep curl a third class lever? Why is a tricep extension a first class lever system? Even though the fulcrum, the pivot point, is the elbow joint. And again, it's all about knowing your anatomy and physiology of the arm. And again, just talking through that. So if we look at third class lever system, okay, I know that the load's at the end. All right, I know if I do a straight line, I get to the tendon, which is my effort, and then I get to the pivot point. All right, the effort's in the middle, third class lever system. Okay, same joint then, but this time the arm is in a flexed position and it's going to be moving down to extend in order to push that ball out of the hand to shoot towards the hoop. Okay, now when you do this, what will happen is the ball is the weight that you're going to be moving. When you draw the line now, the muscle that is responsible for causing extension is the tricep bone. But actually, if you draw a line and go along, you actually get to the fulcrum or pivot point first. And then millimeters after, tiny bit after, you then get to the tendon, all right, or the effort. So when you were to draw that out, that means that the fulcrum is in the middle, i.e. that would then be a first class lever system. Okay, hope that makes sense, but we are talking about tiny millimeters, tiny distances, which means that that is a first class lever system. Okay, the next thing that I want you to do now is to be able to get to our next objective, which is understanding the mechanical advantage and disadvantage of the different classes of lever system. So if you turn to this resource, or it might be on the back of your Say What You See resource, if you could flip that over now. As I go through the next slides, I would like you to fill out the blank box at the bottom where it says mechanical advantage for the first class, mechanical advantage for the second class, and mechanical disadvantage for the third class as I talk through these things. So the first one, mechanical advantage. We know that rowing is a first class lever system. Why is this a mechanical advantage? Well, the reason for this is, and this is the table on the right, I'd like you to copy that into that blank box, is it allows a rower to move a really large load. All right, that's the water and the weight of the people moving through the water. All right, so move a large load with small effort to achieve a higher propulsion through the water. And the reason why that happens is because the load is further away from that pivot point. All right, it's a really good way of moving a large load with a small force. It's a little bit like if you try to slam a door shut. If you were to try to slam that door shut with your hand, press right up to the joint, the pivot point of the door, it'd be really hard to slam it shut. So if you were in a bad mood and you were having a tantrum and you slammed that door shut, you'd slam it at the end of the door and it would absolutely fly. And that's because it's a long way from the pivot point. The advantage of a second class lever system, so standing on your tiptoes, it allows the netballer, or a sporting example, it would allow a netballer to move a really large load, all right, or their body weight with a small effort. And this would be an advantage because it would help them to reach higher when defending. Okay. Again. Okay, if I've just gone on a bit quick there, just make sure you go back a slide and make sure you pause that and copy in the definition. Going on to the disadvantage of a third class lever. So this is classed as a disadvantage. And the reason for this is there's quite a large range of movement. So you can only move a small load. If you look at this fella doing a biceps curl, you can see the range of movement is probably nearly 180 degrees. And you're only doing that with your biceps, which are relatively quite a small group of muscles. Again, if you see people in the gym who've been working out doing weights quite a lot, the reason why their arms have got so big is because they're having to move that large load over a really large range of movement. So in order to deal with that, their muscles grow in size or experience hypertrophy to enable them to move that load over a really large range of movement. Again, pause this slide if you need to. Make sure you copy that down onto that sheet. Okay, I'd now like you to turn back over and go to your Say What You See resource. Okay, and what I'd like you to do now is underneath each sporting example, I've drawn in or I've put in a lever arm already just here. What I'd like you to do is, using your knowledge of everything I've spoken through, is I'd like you to just write down what class of lever system it is. And in order to do that, you're going to need to then draw on the effort, the fulcrum and the load onto your lever arm. Now, before you start this task, the first thing I'd like you to do is, in the middle of your piece of paper, is write in that FLE 1, 2, 3, because that's going to give you an idea about what class of lever system it's going to be. So I'd like you to pause your video and then fill in the diagrams for each lever arm. And once you've done that, I'd like you to just press play and check if you've got your answers correct. Okay, so they're the answers. That's what you should have done. If I excuse me, if I talk through this really quickly, you can see that on the rower in the middle is the fulcrum. So I know that that is a first class lever system. If I go to the rugby player kicking a ball, I know if I've identified properly that the tendon goes over the knee, the pivot point, to attach to the lower leg, that means that the effort is in the middle. So that one is a third class lever system. Going down to the lady doing the biceps curl, thinking about what we said about the structure of the arm when doing that biceps curl upwards, I know that the effort's in the middle, and that means that that is a third class lever system as well. And again, talking about anatomy and the tricep extension to make sure that that basketball player can get power to push that ball out of his hand towards the hoop, I know that in the middle is the fulcrum, so that is a first class lever system. Now, well done if you've managed to get through all that video in one lesson. That's quite a lot of information to get through, especially when you're pausing and going back over information. So if you've got that done in one lesson, that is an absolutely phenomenal effort. But I'd imagine some of you might be finishing this off at home. Okay. If you have finished this and you're in the lesson, if you're in my lesson right now, I'd like you to let me know that you've finished, please. And I'd like you to then come to the front of the classroom and get your extension task, please. Okay, again, if this hasn't made sense completely, just go back to the bit of the video which you're not sure of, or please feel free to post any questions and I'll be happy to try and answer them for you. Alright, best of luck in your GCSE PE exams. See you later, guys.